In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
The sky above Hive Cauldress died in the space of a heartbeat. In the 41st millennium, the laws of physics bend to the will of mad gods, and faith alone holds back the tide of annihilation. Humanity has conquered 1,000,000 worlds, burned 1,000,000 more, and built an empire on the bones of everything it once believed. The Imperium of man endures not through hope, but through hatred. A species united only by its terror of the dark between stars. In 10,000 years, they have seen horrors beyond counting. Demons wearing the faces of children, planets swallowed by hungering hives, gods of rot and rage and pleasure and change, all reaching through the veil to claim what remains of human souls. They believed they had seen everything. They were wrong. If you crave stories of cosmic collisions and impossible heroes, smash that subscribe button. The Emperor protects those who bear witness to the Dark Millennium. Commissar Vera Thorn had served 32 years on the front lines of the Imperium's endless wars. She had watched worlds burn and held the line when lesser soldiers broke. Nothing surprised her anymore, or so she had believed, until the moment the clouds above Hive Cauldress split apart like a wound in reality itself. It was not the sickly tear of warp corruption. She knew that horror intimately, the way the air curdled and screamed when demons pushed through. This was different. This was light, pure, blinding, golden light, stabbing down through the pollution-choked atmosphere like a spear thrown by some forgotten deity. The thunder that followed shattered windows across 6 Hab blocks and sent Hyrcadian veterans diving for cover. "Commissar!" Sergeant Aldrich scrambled to her position, his weathered face pale beneath the grime of 3 days' fighting. "What in the throne's name?" The light struck the ground 2 kilometers ahead, directly in the path of the Chaos cultist advance that had been grinding toward their position for hours. The impact threw bodies, twisted, mutated things that had once been human, spinning through the air like scattered leaves. A shockwave of displaced air slammed into Thorn's defensive line, warm and electric, carrying the scent of ozone and something else. Something that smelled like rain on summer fields. A memory so foreign to this dying hive world that it made her chest ache. Then the lightning began. Not the pale witch fire of psychers or the corrupt discharge of demon engines. This was storm lightning, blue-white and savage, arcing across the cultist horde in branching rivers of annihilation. Hundreds died in the first second, thousands in the next. Thorn raised her magnoculars with trembling hands and focused on the impact crater. A figure stood at its center. He was tall, impossibly tall, towering over the corpses strewn around him like a statue of some ancient Terran war god. Armor gleamed beneath a red cape that snapped in winds that seemed to answer only to him. In his right hand, he held a hammer, and from that hammer poured lightning that turned the Chaos advance into a charnel field of scorched meat and melted corruption. "Emperor, preserve us," Aldrich whispered. Thorn lowered the magnoculars. Her hands had stopped shaking. 32 years of war had taught her one immutable truth. When something impossible happened on a battlefield, you adapted or you died. Theology could wait. "Get me a Vox link to command," she ordered. "Tell them the Chaos assault on Sector 15 has been neutralized. And tell them we have contact with an unknown entity." She paused, watching another bolt of lightning turn a Chaos spawn into a smoking crater. Possibly hostile, possibly divine. Classification pending. The figure in the crater raised his hammer to the sky and the clouds answered with a roar that shook the foundations of the hive. Thor, son of Odin, Prince of Asgard, stood on an alien world in an alien universe, and he did not understand how he had come to be here. The last thing he remembered was the Bifrost shattering. Heimdall's warning cry cut short, the rainbow bridge fragmenting into impossible colors, and then darkness. Darkness filled with whispers that clawed at his mind, voices promising glory and ruin in equal measure. He had fallen through something wrong, something that tasted of madness and smelled of blood. Now he stood in a wasteland of industrial decay, surrounded by the corpses of creatures that defied sanity. Some had too many limbs. Others bore symbols carved into their flesh, 8-pointed stars that made his eyes water when he looked at them directly. The corruption here was palpable, a weight in the air that pressed against his divine senses like a physical force. This was not Midgard. This was not any realm he knew. But the mortals fleeing in terror behind the defensive lines, those he recognized. Their weapons were strange, their armor unfamiliar, but the fear in their eyes was universal. They were soldiers, and they were losing. Thor tightened his grip on Mjolnir and felt the storm answer his call. Whatever this place was, whatever foul sorcery had brought him here, one truth remained constant. He was the god of thunder, and gods protected those who could not protect themselves. The last of the cultists fell, and silence descended over the battlefield like a shroud. The silence lasted exactly 14 seconds. Thor counted them, each heartbeat a thunderclap in his ears as he surveyed the devastation he had wrought. The creatures, twisted things that wore human skin like ill-fitting garments, lay scattered across the blasted earth in smoking heaps. Their blood steamed where it pooled, giving off a foul vapor that made even his divine constitution recoil. Whatever corruption had claimed these souls, it ran deeper than mere flesh. He turned toward the defensive line, where hundreds of soldiers watched him with expressions caught between terror and desperate hope. Their weapons, angular things that hummed with barely contained energy, remained trained on his chest. He could not blame them. In their position, he would have done the same. "I mean you no harm," Thor called out, and the words emerged in their tongue without effort. The All-Tongue had served him across the 9 realms and beyond. It seemed this universe was no exception. "I am Thor, son of Odin. I have come from..." He stopped. How did one explain Asgard to people who had never heard of it? How did one describe the world tree to those who knew only this bleak expanse of metal and misery? "I have come from very far away," he finished, "and I appear to be lost." A figure broke from the defensive line, a woman in a long coat, her face hard as carved stone beneath a peaked cap. She walked toward him without hesitation, though her hand rested on the sidearm at her hip. Thor respected that. Courage and caution in equal measure, a warrior's balance. "You speak Gothic," the woman said. It was not a question. "Yet you claim to be from far away. How far, exactly?" "Another realm entirely." Thor lowered Mjolnir to his side, a gesture of peace. "Another universe, perhaps? I am uncertain. The means of my arrival was violent, uncontrolled." The woman's eyes narrowed. "A warp breach?" "I do not know that term. But the void I fell through was filled with madness, whispers that clawed at my thoughts, colors that should not exist." He gestured at the corpses surrounding them. "And these creatures bore marks that echo that same wrongness. The corruption here is familiar, though I cannot name it." Something shifted in the woman's expression, a flicker of recognition, quickly suppressed. "I am Commissar Vera Thorn, Cadian 412th. You stand on Imperial soil, stranger. whatever you are, wherever you claim to come from. You are now subject to the laws of the God Emperor of mankind. Thor raised an eyebrow. God Emperor, the master of mankind, the Lord of Terra, the beacon that guides humanity through the darkness. Thorn's voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. All humans serve him. All Xenos and demons fall before his light. If you are neither, if you are something else, then you will be judged accordingly. Around them, the soldiers had begun to advance, forming a loose cordon. Thor noted their discipline, the way they moved in coordinated pairs, covering angles and overlapping fields of fire. These were not conscripts or militia. These were veterans. He also noted the fear they tried to hide, the way their eyes kept darting to the corpses he had created, to the scorch marks radiating outward from where he stood. They had seen him call lightning from a clear sky. They had watched him destroy in moments what their weapons could not stop in hours. They did not know if he was savior or threat. Neither, Thor suspected, did their commissar. "I am no demon," he said carefully. "Nor am I Xenos, if that word means what I believe it does. I am Asgardian, a race your people have never encountered because we exist beyond the boundaries of your realm." He paused, choosing his next words with care. "I am what your ancestors might have called a god." The reaction was immediate. Weapons snapped up. Soldiers shouted warnings. Commissar Thorn's hand closed around her sidearm, though she did not draw. "There is only one God," she said, her voice cold as void frost. "And you are not him." Thor held up his hands, palms open. "I did not say I was your God. I said I am a god, one of many in my realm. We are beings of great power and long life, but we are not omnipotent. We bleed. We age, albeit slowly. We can die." He met Thorn's gaze without flinching. "I watched my father die, my mother, my brother twice. Whatever divinity I possess, it has not spared me from grief." The commissar studied him for a long moment. Behind her, a soldier was speaking urgently into a handheld device. A communication apparatus of some kind, Thor guessed. Requesting orders, reporting the impossible. "You saved my soldiers," Thorn said finally. "You destroyed a chaos advance that would have overrun our position within the hour. For that you have my thanks." Her jaw tightened. "But gratitude does not equal trust. You will surrender your weapon and submit to interrogation. The Inquisition will determine what you are." Thor glanced down at Mjolnir. The hammer thrummed against his palm, warm and familiar, the only piece of home he had left in this strange universe. "I cannot surrender this weapon," he said quietly. "Not because I refuse, but because it is impossible. Mjolnir is bound to me by enchantments older than your species. It cannot be taken. It cannot be held by those it deems unworthy." He offered a small, weary smile. "Many have tried. All have failed." "Then you refuse to cooperate." "I refuse nothing. Ask your questions. I will answer truthfully. But Mjolnir stays with me." Thunder rumbled overhead, though the storm had not yet fully dispersed. "This is not negotiable." Commissar Thorn's finger tapped against her sidearm. Once, twice. Thor could see the calculation happening behind her eyes, the weighing of risk against necessity, duty against pragmatism. "The Inquisition will not accept that answer," she said. "Then the Inquisition and I will have words." Before Thorn could respond, the Vox operator rushed forward, his face ashen. "Commissar! Priority signal from orbit. Inquisitorial vessel Malleus Veritatis has entered the system. They detected the energy discharge from the entity's arrival." He swallowed hard. "They're dispatching a shuttle. ETA 40 minutes. Thorn closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had hardened in her expression, a resignation that spoke of experience with forces beyond her authority. "Then we have 40 minutes, she said, turning back to Thor. "I suggest you use them to prepare a very convincing explanation, stranger. Because the people coming to meet you will not be satisfied with tales of other realms and enchanted hammers. They will want proof." Her voice dropped. "And if they do not find it, they will tear you apart to see what lies beneath." Thor looked up at the sickly sky of this dying world, at the distant spires of the Hive City rising like blackened teeth against the horizon. Somewhere out there, answers waited. A way home, an explanation for the madness that had brought him here. But first, it seemed, he would have to survive the hospitality of this Imperium. 40 minutes, he repeated. "Then let us not waste them. Tell me of your God Emperor, Commissar. Tell me of the darkness your people fight. And tell me of these demons that wear mortal flesh." He needed to understand this universe. And understanding began with questions. Commissar Thorn spoke, and Thor listened with growing unease. She told him of the Imperium of man, a million worlds bound together by faith, fear, and the iron will of a being called the God Emperor. 10,000 years ago, this emperor had walked among his people, a figure of unimaginable power who united humanity and led them in a great crusade across the stars. He had crafted genetically perfect warriors called Space Marines, led by demigod generals known as Primarchs. He had been, by all accounts, everything a god should be. Then came the heresy, betrayal from within. Half of the Emperor's sons turned against him, corrupted by powers from beyond the veil of reality. A civil war that drowned the galaxy in blood. And at its end, the Emperor broken, entombed upon a device called the Golden Throne, kept alive only by the daily sacrifice of 1,000 psychic souls. "He has not spoken in 10 millennia, Thorn said, her voice carrying the weight of catechism. "He cannot move, cannot act, cannot intervene directly in the affairs of his Imperium. But his will endures. His light, the Astronomicon, guides our ships through the warp. Without him, humanity would be scattered, blind, easy prey for the horrors that hunger in the dark." Thor stood motionless, processing the enormity of what he had heard. A god who had sacrificed everything to save his people, now trapped in eternal agony, worshipped by trillions who would never know his voice. The parallels to Odin's own sacrifices were not lost on him. The All-Father had given an eye for wisdom, had hung himself from Yggdrasil for 9 days to learn the runes of power. But even Odin had retained his agency, his ability to act. This emperor had none. He was a corpse on a throne, and his children burned worlds in his name. "The corruption I witnessed," Thor said slowly. "The creatures I destroyed. They serve the powers that betrayed your emperor. Chaos." Thorn spat the word like a curse. "The ruinous powers. 4 gods of the warp. Korn, the blood god. Nurgle, the plague father. Tzeentch, the changer of ways. Slaanesh, the dark prince." She made a warding sign across her chest. "They are not gods, as you describe yourself. They are infections. Cancers born from mortal emotion, grown vast and terrible in the realm beyond reality. They offer power to fools and desperate men, and the price is always the soul." Thor's jaw tightened. He had faced beings that fed on mortal suffering before, entities that wore divinity as a mask for hunger. But 4 of them, vast enough to threaten a galaxy-spanning empire, that was a scale of evil he had rarely contemplated. "And these gods," he said carefully. They noticed my arrival? Thorn's silence was answer enough. The storm above had faded to a sullen gray, but Thor could feel something watching from beyond the clouds. Not physical eyes. Something deeper. Something that pressed against his mind like fingers testing the strength of a door. The whispers he had heard during his fall through the void had not entirely stopped. They lurked at the edges of his consciousness, patient and hungry. Warrior, something breathed. Champion, you reek of battle and thunder. How sweet your skull would look upon the throne of brass. Thor slammed his mental defenses shut with the force of a thunderclap. He had resisted the Mind Stone's influence, had broken free of Scarlet Witch's manipulations, had stood against psychic entities that spanned dimensions. Whatever these chaos gods were, they would find his mind no easy conquest. But the fact that they had tried, that they had noticed him so quickly, spoke to a level of awareness that troubled him deeply. You felt that, Thorn said. It was not a question. She was watching him with new wariness, her hand once again resting on her sidearm. The touch of chaos. Most mortals cannot perceive it directly. Those who can are either psychers or... She trailed off. Or something else entirely. Thor finished. Yes, I felt it. A presence testing my defenses. It spoke of blood and skulls. He hefted Mjolnir, and a flicker of lightning danced across its surface. It was rebuffed. For now. For now. Thorn's voice was grim. That is the nature of chaos. It does not relent. It does not forget. If the blood god has marked you, his servants will come. They always come. Around them, the soldiers had finished establishing a defensive perimeter. Medicae personnel moved among the wounded, administering aid with brutal efficiency. The dead were being cataloged and prepared for disposal. Cremation, Thor assumed, given the corruption that had claimed their enemies. Nothing of chaos could be allowed to linger. It was all so familiar. The aftermath of battle, the grim necessities of war, the way survivors found purpose in routine because the alternative was contemplating the horrors they had witnessed. Thor had seen it 1,000 times across 1,000 conflicts. But there was something different about these people, a hardness that went beyond veteran discipline. They did not mourn their dead so much as process them. Grief was a luxury they could not afford in a universe where stopping to weep might mean missing the next attack. What kind of existence produced soldiers like this? What kind of galaxy demanded such perfect, unfeeling efficiency? The answer, Thor suspected, was the kind of galaxy where hope itself had become a liability. Tell me of the Inquisition, he said, pulling his thoughts back to the immediate threat. You spoke of them with caution. Thorn's expression flickered, a crack in her composure quickly sealed. The Inquisition is the Emperor's left hand. Where the Space Marines are his sword and the Imperial Guard his shield, the Inquisition is his eye. They root out corruption, heresy, and threats to humanity wherever they are found. She paused. They answer to no one but themselves, and the Emperor's will as they interpret it. A single Inquisitor can condemn a world to death if they deem it necessary. Condemn a world, Thor repeated flatly. You mean destroy it? Exterminatus? Virus bombs, cyclonic torpedoes, atmospheric incinerators. When corruption runs too deep, when salvation is impossible, the only solution is cauterization. Thorn met his gaze without flinching. It has happened more times than anyone cares to count. It will happen again. That is the price of survival in the 41st millennium. Thor felt something cold settle in his chest. He had known civilizations that practiced scorched earth tactics, that burned villages to deny resources to enemies. but the annihilation of entire worlds. Billions of souls erased because someone in authority decided they could not be saved. That was not war. That was butchery dressed in the language of necessity. "And if this Inquisitor decides I am a threat?" he asked quietly. "If they determine that I cannot be saved?" Thorn did not answer. She did not need to. The sound of engines cut through the moment, a harsh whine descending from above. Thor looked up to see a craft breaking through the cloud cover, angular and black, adorned with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Not chaos corruption, but something adjacent. Wards and sigils designed to repel the very powers they fought. "They're early," Thorn said, and for the first time, Thor heard genuine fear in her voice. "That shuttle should have taken 40 minutes. They pushed their engines to arrive in 20. The craft landed in a storm of displaced air and debris, its loading ramp already descending before the landing struts had fully engaged. Figures emerged, soldiers in heavier armor than the guardsmen, their faces hidden behind skull-faced helms. They moved with the precision of those accustomed to killing without hesitation. And behind them, walking with the casual authority of one who held life and death in their hands, came a woman in ornate power armor. Her face was gaunt, lined with age and scarred by experiences Thor could only imagine. A hammer-shaped symbol hung from a chain around her neck, the same symbol he had seen on the soldier's shoulders. But it was her eyes that caught his attention. They were the eyes of someone who had looked into the abyss so many times that the abyss had started looking back. "I am Inquisitor Helena Vorn, Ordo Malleus," the woman announced, her voice carrying across the devastated battlefield. "I am here to determine what you are, stranger." Her gaze locked onto Thor with unsettling intensity. "Pray to whatever powers you serve that I like the answer." Thor stepped forward, Mjolnir hanging at his side, and met the Inquisitor's stare without flinching. "I serve no power but my own conscience," he replied, "and I do not pray, I act." The Inquisitor smiled. It did not reach her eyes. "Then we shall see," she said, "what your actions have wrought." The interrogation chamber aboard the Malleus Veritatis was designed to break souls. Thor recognized the architecture of intimidation, the bare metal walls, the single harsh light overhead, the chair bolted to the floor with restraints meant for beings far less powerful than himself. He had seen similar rooms in the dungeons of Asgard, in the holding cells of S.H.I.E.L.D., in 100 prisons across the 9 realms. The details changed. The intent never did. He sat without being asked, though he ignored the restraints. Inquisitor Vorn had not insisted, which told him she was intelligent enough to recognize a pointless battle when she saw one. Her stormtroopers had tried to take Mjolnir at the shuttle's landing ramp. The hammer had not moved. 3 soldiers had herniated discs. 1 had dislocated both shoulders. Thor had apologized. He had warned them, after all. Now the Inquisitor sat across from him, a data slate in her hands, her eyes never leaving his face. Behind her stood a figure that made Thor's skin prickle with unease. A thin man in robes of gray, his head shaved, his eyes empty of anything resembling humanity. Psyker, Thor guessed. A mind reader brought to verify his answers or tear the truth from his thoughts by force. He pitied the man if he tried the latter. "You claim to be a god," Vorna began without preamble. "From a realm called Asgard, in a universe separate from our own. You claim to have arrived here by accident, through a method of travel that somehow intersected with the warp without corrupting you." She set down the data slate. "Do you understand how this sounds to someone who has spent 60 years hunting demons?" "I imagine it sounds like a lie," Thor said calmly. "Or a trap. A demon wearing a pleasing face, speaking comfortable words, waiting for the moment to strike. He leaned forward slightly. But consider this, Inquisitor. If I were a demon, why would I save your soldiers? Why destroy a chaos advance that was on the verge of overwhelming Imperial defenses? Demons serve the ruinous powers. I slaughtered their servants by the hundreds. Demons are creatures of deception. The greater ones play games that span millennia. A single battle means nothing if the long war is won. Vorn's voice was flat, clinical. You could beat Cicatrix, a lord of change wearing mortality as a costume, manipulating events toward some incomprehensible goal. Then test me. The words hung in the air. The psyker behind Vorne shifted slightly, his empty eyes flickering with something that might have been interest. Test me, Thor repeated. You have methods, I assume. Ways to detect warp corruption, to expose demonic influence. I have nothing to hide. Probe my mind if you must, though I warn you, my mental defenses are considerable. Your reader may find the experience unpleasant. Vorn studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded to the psyker. The man stepped forward, raising one hand toward Thor's temple. His eyes began to glow with a sickly luminescence, and Thor felt the first tentative brush of psychic intrusion against his consciousness. It was gentle at first, questioning, a mind reaching out to touch another, seeking purchase. Thor let him in, partially. He opened the outer chambers of his memory, images of Asgard's golden spires, of Odin sitting upon Hlidskjalf, of Frigga's gentle smile and Loki's mischievous grin. He showed the psyker the Bifrost Bridge, rainbow light spanning the void between realms. He showed him battles against frost giants and dark elves, against Hela and Thanos, and threats that would make the horrors of this universe seem almost mundane. He showed him what a god's existence looked like. The psyker gasped. His nose began to bleed. He staggered backward, nearly falling, catching himself on Vorn's chair with trembling hands. Well? The Inquisitor demanded. Not demon? The psyker's voice was hoarse, strained. No warp taint, no corruption. His mind is... He shook his head, wiping blood from his upper lip. It is like staring into a star, Inquisitor. Vast and ancient and burning with power, but clean, pure. He looked at Thor with something approaching awe. He is what he claims to be, something from beyond our reality entirely. Vorn's expression did not change, but Thor saw her fingers tighten almost imperceptibly on the data slate. That is not possible, she said quietly. The warp is the only realm beyond real space. There is no beyond that. And yet, here I am. Thor spread his hands. Your psyker has confirmed what I told you from the beginning. I am not your enemy, Inquisitor. I am a stranger in a strange land, seeking to understand where I am and how I might return home. He paused. But while I am here, I see no reason why I cannot help. Your people face horrors that would break lesser civilizations. I have spent my life fighting such horrors. Our goals align. Our goals? Vorn's voice carried an edge of bitter amusement. You know nothing of our goals, stranger. You have been in this universe for less than a day. You have seen one battle on one dying world. You have no concept of the scale of what the Imperium faces, the enemies on every front, the corruption within our own ranks, the slow decay of everything humanity once built. She stood, pacing to the chamber's single viewport. Beyond the reinforced glass, the stars burned cold and distant. The Emperor did not just save humanity, she continued, her voice softer now. He elevated us. He showed us what we could become. A species united, rational, free from the superstitions that had enslaved us for millennia. He was building a future where the warp would hold no power over mortal minds. Her jaw tightened. And then his sons betrayed him. Half the Imperium burned. The Emperor fell. And we have spent 10,000 years picking up the pieces, fighting a war we could never win, only delay. Thor rose from his chair and moved to stand beside her. She did not flinch away, though her hand drifted toward her bolt pistol. "I knew a king once," he said quietly, looking out at the stars. "My father, Odin. He built a realm that spanned the 9 worlds, enforced peace through strength, and believed he was creating a legacy that would last forever." He paused. He was wrong. His sins caught up with him. His secrets destroyed his family. In the end, everything he built crumbled to ash, and I was left to pick up the pieces. He turned to face the Inquisitor directly. "I understand loss, Helena Vorn. I understand fighting wars that cannot be won, only survived. I understand watching everything you love die by inches while you stand helpless to stop it." Lightning flickered in his eyes, not a threat, but a promise. "But I also understand something your Imperium seems to have forgotten. Hope is not weakness. Compassion is not compromise. You can fight the darkness without becoming it." Vorn stared at him for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, but a crack in the armor she wore like a second skin. "Pretty words," she said finally. "The Imperium has heard pretty words before. They usually precede betrayal. Then do not trust my words. Trust my actions." Thor hefted Mjolnir, and the hammer sang with contained thunder. "Point me at your enemies, Inquisitor. Let me prove what I am through deeds, not promises. If I fail you, if I prove false, you will have your answer, and you may attempt whatever justice you see fit." "Attempt," Vorn repeated dryly. "You are confident. I am honest. There is a difference." The Inquisitor turned away from the viewport, her decision made. "There is a Space Marine chapter in this sector," she said. "The Sons of Dorn, successors of the Imperial Fists. Their chapter master has been tracking a Chaos warband that escaped the fall of Cadia. Remnants of the Black Legion, led by a sorcerer of considerable power. They have been raiding Imperial worlds for months, always staying one step ahead." She fixed Thor with a measuring gaze. "Help them. Destroy the warband. Bring me the sorcerer's head." A cold smile touched her lips. "Do that, and perhaps I will begin to believe you are what you claim to be." Thor returned the smile with one of his own. "Then take me to these Sons of Dorn. I have not had a proper battle in far too long." The battle barge Phalanx's Oath was a cathedral given form and set adrift among the stars. Thor had seen grand vessels before, Asgardian longships that sailed the cosmic winds, Kree warships bristling with weapons, the massive bulk of Thanos' sanctuary, the Seku, blocking out the sun above Wakanda. But this was something different. This was a monument to war itself, a structure so vast that it contained entire manufactorums, training halls, and chapels within its armored hull. Kilometers of adamantium and plasteel, shaped by hands that worshiped the act of construction as a sacred duty. He stood in the chapter master's audience chamber, surrounded by giants. The Sons of Dorn were everything Commissar Thorn had described and more. Each space marine towered over mortal men, their bodies encased in powered armor that hummed with barely contained lethality. They were weapons given flesh, soldiers engineered for a single purpose, the destruction of humanity's enemies. Their faces were scarred, their eyes hard, their bearing that of warriors who had known nothing but battle for centuries. And they looked at Thor with open suspicion. "The Inquisitor vouches for you," Chapter Master Aldrich Castellan said, his voice a rumble of grinding stone. He sat upon a throne of black marble, his armor the yellow of old bone, his left arm replaced by a bionic limb that ended in a power fist capable of crushing tank armor. "She claims you are not demon, not Xenos, not mutant. She claims you are something the Imperium has never encountered." "I am," Thor replied simply. "She also claims you call yourself a god." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. Around the throne, the chapter master's honor guard shifted almost imperceptibly, hands moving closer to weapons, weight redistributing for combat. These were warriors who had fought demons that claimed divinity. They did not take such assertions lightly. Thor met the chapter master's gaze without flinching. "Among my people, the term has a specific meaning. We are the Aesir, a race of beings with powers and lifespans far beyond mortal ken. We are not omnipotent, not omniscient, not infallible. We can be wounded, deceived, killed." He paused. "But we are also more than human. That is simply fact, not boast." "The Emperor was more than human," Castellan replied. "He was the pinnacle of our species, the culmination of millennia of evolution and sacrifice. He earned his divinity through deeds that reshaped the galaxy." The chapter master leaned forward, his bionic arm whirring. "What have you done to earn such a title?" It was a challenge. Thor recognized it for what it was, a test of character as much as capability. These warriors respected action, not words. Claims meant nothing without proof. "I have defended my homeworld against invasion more times than I can count," Thor said. "I have stood against beings that devoured stars and gods that predated creation. I have died and returned. I have lost my father, my mother, my brother, my home. And I have kept fighting because that is what I am. Not a god who demands worship, but a warrior who refuses to yield." He extended Mjolnir, holding it out toward the chapter master. "Your soldiers could not lift this hammer, not because they lack strength, but because it judges worthiness, the willingness to sacrifice, to protect, to stand for something greater than oneself." Lightning crackled along the hammer's surface. "I do not ask you to believe I am divine. I ask you to believe I am an ally. Test me in battle. Let my actions speak where my words fail." Castellan studied the hammer for a long moment. Then, slowly, he rose from his throne. He was massive. Even among space marines, he stood apart, a figure of raw physical power wrapped in centuries of experience. When he reached for Mjolnir, Thor did not pull away. The chapter master's gauntlet closed around the handle. The hammer did not move. Castellan pulled. Veins stood out on his temples. His bionic arm whined with exertion. Servos straining against impossibility. For 3 seconds, 5, 10, he fought against the enchantment, a warrior's pride demanding he succeed where others had failed. Mjolnir did not budge. When Castellan finally released his grip, there was something new in his expression. Not defeat. Space Marines did not understand defeat, but acknowledgement, recognition of a peer. "Interesting," he said quietly. "A weapon that judges the soul, not the strength. The Emperor himself might have appreciated such a thing." "Perhaps he would have been able to lift it," Thor replied. "From what I have heard, he sounds like someone who understood sacrifice." The words hung in the air, an offering of respect, carefully calibrated. Thor had learned long ago that warriors responded to different approaches than politicians or priests. These men did not want flattery. They wanted truth wrapped in recognition of their own worth. Castellan returned to his throne, his expression thoughtful. The warband we hunt is led by a sorcerer named Vorax the Unbound. He was once 1,000 Suns legionnaire, a traitor who turned from the Emperor's light 10,000 years ago during the heresy. He has spent millennia perfecting his craft, drawing power from the changer of ways, twisting reality to suit his whims. The chapter master's voice hardened. 3 months ago, he attacked the shrine world of Sanctum Majoris. 12 million souls, dedicated to the Emperor's worship. He did not simply kill them, he changed them, transformed an entire population into screaming, mutating horrors that tore each other apart while he watched and laughed. Thor's grip on Mjolnir tightened. He had fought beings that reveled in cruelty before. Hela, drunk on death. Thanos, convinced his genocide was mercy. Loki, in his darkest moments, lost to jealousy and rage. But the casual enormity of what Castellan described went beyond simple villainy. This was evil as art form, suffering as entertainment. Where is he now? Thor asked. Our librarians have traced his warp signature to the Vidian Reach, a cluster of dead worlds on the edge of the Cicatrix Maledictum, the great rift that split the galaxy in two. He is gathering power for something. Our seers cannot determine what, only that it will be catastrophic if completed. Castellan fixed Thor with a measuring stare. We assault his position in 6 hours. My battle brothers have been preparing for this strike for months. We will breach his defenses, eliminate his cult, and end his existence. The chapter master's voice dropped. The question is whether you fight beside us or remain here under inquisitorial supervision. It was not really a question. They both knew it. I did not come to this universe to watch others wage war against evil, Thor said. I came, accidentally perhaps, but meaningfully. If there is darkness to fight, I will fight it. If there are innocents to protect, I will protect them. He raised Mjolnir, and thunder rolled through the chamber, despite the void of space surrounding them. Point me at this sorcerer, chapter master. Let him learn what it means to face the god of thunder. For the first time, something that might have been approval flickered across Castellan's scarred face. You speak like a warrior, he said. We shall see if you fight like one. He gestured to his honor guard. Prepare the Thunderhawk transports, full assault configuration. His eyes never left Thor. And find our guest armor that fits. If he is to stand with the sons of Dorn, he will look the part. Thor smiled grimly. I appreciate the offer, chapter master. But I have faced gods and monsters in nothing but my own skin. Your sorcerer will find me adequately equipped. Lightning danced in his eyes. More than adequately. The Vidian Reach was a graveyard of worlds. Thor stood at the observation deck of the Thunderhawk transport as it descended through the debris field. Shattered moons, burned out hulks of ancient vessels. The scattered remnants of civilizations that had died before humanity crawled from Terra's oceans. The void here felt wrong, heavy with a pressure that had nothing to do with physics. The great rift Castellan had spoken of dominated the horizon, a wound in reality itself that bled impossible colors into the black. The Cicatrix Maledictum, the galaxy's scar. Thor had seen dimensional breaches before. He had watched Malekith tear holes in the fabric of the 9 realms, had witnessed the Bifrost's destruction send shockwaves across cosmic distances. But this was something else entirely. This was a wound that would not heal. A permanent tear between the material universe and the realm of madness beyond. And somewhere in that bleeding edge of reality, a sorcerer was building something terrible. We make planetfall in 10 minutes. Captain Hector of the Third Company materialized at Thor's shoulder, his helmet mag-locked to his belt, his scarred face grim. The fortress is located in the ruins of what was once a cardinal world, a center of imperial faith before the rift opened. Billions once lived there. Now it is home only to the dead and those who worship them. What resistance should I expect? Cultists by the thousands, mutants, warp spawn. Vorax keeps a menagerie of horrors bound to his will. Hector's voice carried professional detachment, but Thor caught the undercurrent of anticipation beneath. These warriors lived for battle. Our primary objective is the sorcerer himself. Kill him and his followers will scatter. His bindings will fail. His works will collapse. And if he runs? A cold smile touched Hector's lips. Librarian Theron has been working on a solution. Vorax will not escape through the warp. Not this time. The transport shuddered as it entered the planet's atmosphere, or what remained of it. The air outside was thin, toxic, barely capable of supporting life. The surface below was a hellscape of burned cathedrals and shattered cities, everything coated in a fine ash that might once have been human. Thor felt the weight of it pressing against his chest. 12 million souls on Sanctum Majoris. How many more had died here, on this forgotten world? How many across the galaxy sacrificed to the ambitions of monsters who called themselves gods? "You are angry," a voice whispered at the edge of his consciousness. "Good. Anger is fuel. Anger is power. Let it burn, Thunderbearer. Let it consume you." Thor slammed his mental defenses shut with enough force to make his temples throb. The whispers had grown stronger as they approached the rift. Chaos pressing against his mind like water, seeking cracks in a dam. He could feel the blood god's hunger most clearly, that eternal thirst for skulls and slaughter. But there were other presences too, subtler, more patient. They wanted him, all of them. A being of his power, uncorrupted and unaligned, was a prize beyond measure. They would be disappointed. The Thunderhawk touched down in the shadow of a ruined basilica, its engines screaming as they fought against the unstable gravity. Around them, 4 other transports disgorged their cargo. 50 Space Marines in total, the elite of the Sons of Dorn's Third Company, each one a veteran of 100 campaigns. And at their head, stepping into the ash-choked air with Mjolnir crackling at his side, walked Thor. "The fortress lies 3 kilometers north," Hector announced over the Voxnet. "Squad Validus, take the eastern approach. Squad Ferris, western flank. The rest of you with me and our guest. We hit them hard, we hit them fast, and we do not stop until Vorax's head is on a pike." The Space Marines moved out with mechanical precision, bolters held ready, every sense tuned for ambush. Thor matched their pace easily, his eyes scanning the ruins for movement. The ash-deadened sound, muffled footsteps, created a silence that felt almost sacred. Then the silence broke. They came from everywhere at once, pouring from shattered doorways, crawling from beneath collapsed walls, dropping from the skeletal remains of bell towers. Cultists in ragged robes, their bodies twisted by mutation, their eyes burning with fanatical devotion. Hundreds of them, then thousands, a tide of corrupted flesh hurling itself at the Imperial advance. The Space Marines responded with devastating efficiency. Bolters roared, explosive rounds tearing through bodies in sprays of contaminated blood. Chainswords screamed to life, carving paths through the horde. battle brothers covered each other with the precision of warriors who had trained together for centuries. But there were so many, too many. For every cultist that fell, 3 more took their place. Thor smiled. He had been holding back, testing the waters of this universe's combat, trying to understand how his allies fought before committing fully. But now, surrounded by howling fanatics and the stench of corruption, he felt something familiar kindle in his chest. The joy of righteous battle. Mjolnir sang as he hurled it into the thickest concentration of enemies, the hammer carving a path of destruction that left shattered bodies in its wake. It returned to his hand in an instant, and he threw it again, then again, each impact a thunderclap that sent cultists flying like scattered leaves. Lightning answered his call without hesitation, brighter here somehow, feeding off the storm of psychic energy that saturated this cursed place. It arced from his fingertips, from his eyes, from the hammer itself, turning the battlefield into a nightmare of strobing illumination and screaming dead. By the throne! Someone breathed over the vox. Captain Hector, Thor realized. The unflappable veteran, staring at the carnage with something approaching wonder. Thor landed in the center of a cultist formation, Mjolnir crushing 3 bodies with a single swing. He pivoted, lightning exploding outward in a corona that incinerated everything within 10 meters. Corruption burned, mutations melted. The air itself seemed to recoil from his fury. "Push forward," he roared, his voice carrying across the battlefield like a physical force. "They cannot stand against us. Not today." The Space Marines rallied around him, their advance becoming a spearhead with Thor at its tip. Where he struck, enemies died. Where he walked, lightning followed. The cultist horde began to waver, their fanaticism no match for the systematic destruction being visited upon them. And then, from the fortress ahead, something answered. The sky tore open, not the sickly purple of the rift, but a wound of pure pink flame. And from it descended a creature that made Thor's blood run cold. It was beautiful and terrible in equal measure, a thing of impossible angles and shifting geometry, its form suggesting femininity without committing to anything so mundane as fixed shape. Wings of crystallized agony spread behind it. Eyes that numbered in the dozens blinked across its surface. A demon, a true demon, summoned from the depths of the warp. "Keeper of secrets," Hector shouted, genuine alarm cutting through his battle calm. "Greater demon of Slanesh, all units fall back to..." "No." Thor stepped forward, Mjolnir beginning to spin at his side. "No retreat. Not from this." The demon's laugh was music and murder, pleasure and pain intertwined until they became indistinguishable. "Little godling," it purred, its voice sliding directly into his mind despite his defenses. "How delicious you smell. How bright your soul burns. I will savor you for centuries. I will teach you pleasures beyond imagining." Thor raised Mjolnir to the sky, and the clouds, such as they were, began to churn. "I am Thor Odinson," he said quietly. "I have faced creatures that would make you weep with inadequacy. I have killed gods and monsters, and things that have no names in any tongue." Lightning gathered. The air screamed with building charge. "You want to teach me something?" His eyes blazed white. "Then learn this lesson first." He brought the hammer down, and the world became thunder. The lightning strike split the sky from horizon to horizon. Thor had fought greater demons before, or beings that might have been called such in this universe. Surtur, wreathed in eternal flame, large enough to crack planets. Hela, goddess of death, drawing power from Asgard itself. The Destroyer, an automaton of pure annihilation that had leveled cities in moments. This keeper of secrets was something different, something that fought not just with claws and strength, but with sensation itself. The demon twisted away from the initial strike, impossibly graceful, its form blurring between states of matter. Where the lightning touched its skin, it moaned, not in pain, but in something far more disturbing. Pleasure. It was drinking his attack, transmuting destruction into ecstasy. Yes, it breathed, its voice a caress against his thoughts. More. Give me more, Thunder God. Show me what you are. Thor gritted his teeth and launched himself forward, Mjolnir leading. The demon met his charge with a sweep of its massive claw, the impact sending shockwaves rippling across the battlefield. Space Marines were thrown from their feet. Cultists burst apart from the pressure differential alone. They traded blows at speeds that blurred mortal perception. Hammer against claw, lightning against warp fire, divine fury against demonic hunger. Each strike should have been lethal. Each impact should have ended the fight. But the Keeper simply absorbed everything Thor threw at it, growing stronger with every exchange. You cannot hurt me with violence. The demon laughed, its form shifting to wrap around him, trying to ensnare him in limbs that promised forbidden delights. Pain is pleasure. Destruction is sensation. Everything you do feeds me, little god. Everything you are makes me more. Thor felt the demon's influence pressing against his mind. Not the crude hunger of corn that he had rebuffed before, but something subtler, insinuating. It showed him visions. Asgard restored, his family alive, an eternity of peace and contentment. All he had to do was stop fighting. All he had to do was surrender to the feeling. For one terrible moment, he wanted to. Then he remembered Jane's face as she crumbled to dust in his arms during the decimation. He remembered his mother's last words, spoken with the certainty of someone who had already seen her own death. He remembered Loki, knife in hand, choosing sacrifice over survival for the first time in his long, complicated life. Love was not pleasure. Love was sacrifice. And sacrifice was something this creature could never understand. You know nothing, Thor snarled, and reached deep within himself, past the lightning, past the storm, to the spark of the Odinforce that had been his birthright since before he understood what it meant. He had not used this power since his father's death. It was too vast, too difficult to control, too bound up in grief and loss. But now, facing a creature that fed on sensation, he understood what he needed to do. He needed to give it something it couldn't digest. The Odinforce exploded outward, not as lightning, not as thunder, but as presence. The weight of Asgard's legacy, 10,000 years of divine authority, the accumulated will of every All-Father who had come before. It was not an attack. It was a statement of absolute, unquestionable reality. I am. The demon screamed. For the first time, there was no pleasure in the sound. This was agony, pure and unfiltered. The pain of a being that had never encountered anything beyond sensation, suddenly confronting something that simply existed beyond its comprehension. The Keeper thrashed, its form destabilizing, its countless eyes weeping tears of luminescent ichor. What are you? It shrieked, all seduction gone from its voice. What are you? Thor raised Mjolnir. I am the son of Odin. I am the god of thunder. Lightning gathered around the hammer, but it was different now. Golden instead of blue, carrying the weight of his father's legacy. And I am your end. He struck. The Keeper of Secrets came apart in a cascade of impossible light, its essence scattering across the warp like mist before a hurricane. It would reform eventually. Demons did not truly die. But it would be centuries before it could manifest in real space again. Centuries of healing, centuries of remembering the thing that had broken it. Thor landed heavily, one knee striking the ash-covered ground. The Odinforce retreated back into its dormant state, and exhaustion crashed over him like a wave. He had not drawn on that power in so long. He had forgotten how much it cost. But he was alive, and the demon was gone. Throne of Terra. Captain Hector's voice cut through the ringing in Thor's ears. The Space Marine stood a dozen meters away, his armor scorched by the battle's proximity, his expression unreadable behind his helm. I have fought greater demons before. I have seen them banished by librarians and grey knights, and weapons blessed by the Emperor himself. He removed his helmet, revealing a face marked by awe and something that might have been fear. I have never seen one unmade by presence alone. Thor pushed himself to his feet, using Mjolnir as a crutch. His muscles ached, his mind felt scraped raw, but there was work still to be done. "The sorcerer," he said. "Vorax? Where?" Hector pointed toward the fortress looming ahead, a structure of twisted spires and bleeding walls, architecture that hurt the eye to examine. The demon was his guardian, his last line of defense before we reach him. Then we should not keep him waiting. They advanced through the fortress's outer defenses in grim silence, the surviving Space Marines forming a protective cordon around their exhausted ally. The cultists had broken entirely now, fleeing into the ruins or simply collapsing where they stood, their will shattered along with their demonic patron. The inner sanctum was a cathedral of corruption. Vorax the Unbound stood at its center, surrounded by concentric circles of burning sigils. He was tall, even by Space Marine standards, his ancient armor a deep crimson trimmed with gold that had long since tarnished to black. His helmet was removed, revealing a face that shifted constantly, features flowing like wax, never settling into a fixed configuration. "So," the sorcerer said, his voice carrying harmonics that suggested multiple speakers, "you are the anomaly that destroyed my keeper, the thing from beyond the veil that has so troubled the Changer's sight." Thor stepped forward, Mjolnir held ready despite his fatigue. "Your demon is banished. Your cult is broken. Your fortress falls around you." He met those shifting eyes without flinching. "Surrender, and I will grant you a clean death. Continue this madness, and I will show you exactly what troubled your master's sight." Vorax laughed, a sound like breaking glass and screaming winds. "Surrender? To a being who does not even understand what he has stumbled into?" The sorcerer spread his arms, and the sigils around him flared brighter. "I have served the Changer of Ways for 10,000 years. I have seen the rise and fall of empires. I have walked the crystal labyrinth and bartered with beings that make your Asgardian gods look like children playing with matches." The air began to twist around him, reality itself bending to his will. "You are powerful, stranger. I will grant you that. But power without knowledge is just a bigger hammer." His eyes blazed with warp light. "Let me show you what knowledge can do." The sanctum exploded into chaos. Reality became a weapon. One moment, Thor stood on solid ground, surrounded by the grim architecture of chaos. The next, the floor dissolved into a sea of screaming faces, their mouths opening to swallow him whole. The air thickened into liquid sorrow, each breath tasting of forgotten grief and lost opportunities. Gravity reversed, then inverted, then ceased to exist entirely. Vorax was not attacking with brute force. He was rewriting the local laws of physics, turning the sanctum into his personal canvas of madness. "Hold formation," Captain Hector bellowed, his voice strained as his power armor fought to compensate for the shifting gravity. The Space Marines opened fire, bolter rounds streaking toward the sorcerer, but the projectiles twisted in midair, curving back toward their firers, or simply vanishing into shimmering portals. "Librarian Theron, counter him!" A son of Dorn in blue-marked armor stepped forward, his hands raised, a psychic hood glowing brightly around his neck. "The veil is thin here, Captain. His connection to the warp is..." The librarian screamed as his own power backlashed, throwing him to the ground, convulsing, his armor smoking. Vorax laughed, the sound echoing from impossible directions. "You bring a candle to fight a starfall? How quaint." Thor gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stand against the torrent of unreality. This was different from the Mind Stone's influence or Loki's illusions. This was not mental manipulation. This was the sorcerer physically rewriting the rules of existence around them. Mjolnir felt heavy in his hand, its enchantment struggling to find purchase in a reality that refused to stay constant. "You see?" Vorax's form flickered, appearing simultaneously in a dozen places around the chamber. "This universe has rules, Thunder God, but they are flexible for those with the will to bend them. The warp is the key, the realm of thought and emotion given form, and I have had 10,000 years to learn its secrets." Thor closed his eyes. He had faced tricksters before. He had fought magic with magic, science with science, brute force with brute force. But this was different. This required a different approach. He remembered his father's lessons, spoken in the quiet halls of Asgard's library, when Thor was still young enough to believe battle was the answer to everything. "Power is not merely strength, my son," Odin had said, his single eye holding depths of wisdom Thor could barely comprehend. "It is also stability. A mountain does not move because it is rooted in the earth. A star does not flicker because its fire is constant. When reality itself becomes unstable, you must become the anchor." Thor opened his eyes, and they blazed not with lightning, but with golden certainty. "I am Thor Odinson," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos with impossible clarity. "I am the son of Odin All-Father, king of Asgard. I am the god of thunder, protector of the 9 realms." With each declaration, he took a step forward. The screaming floor solidified beneath his feet. The weeping air stilled. The shifting gravity stabilized. "I have faced the darkness between stars and found it wanting. I have stood against the end of all things and refused to yield." Vorax's mocking smile faltered. The sorcerer gestured, and blades of crystallized nightmare shot toward Thor from every direction. They shattered against an invisible barrier inches from his skin. "This is not possible," Vorax whispered, his voice losing its harmonic certainty. "The warp answers to will, but your will should not be strong enough to..." "I am not drawing power from your warp," Thor said, now standing mere feet from the sorcerer. The Space Marines watched in stunned silence, their weapons lowered, the battle forgotten in the face of this fundamental confrontation. "I am imposing my reality upon yours. There is a difference." He raised Mjolnir, and for the first time, true fear showed in Vorax's ever-shifting features. "The changer of ways showed me this moment," the sorcerer shrieked, backing away, his hands weaving frantic patterns in the air. "He showed me 1,000 possible futures, and in none of them did you..." "Your god of change," Thor interrupted, his voice quiet but absolute. did not account for something from outside his domain, a variable his equations could not contain. Lightning gathered around the hammer, not the blue-white electricity of earth storms, but the golden fire of the Bifrost itself, the primordial energy that bound the 9 realms together. I am that variable. He struck. The hammer did not merely hit Vorax's physical form. It struck his connection to the warp, severing the 10,000-year-old bond that had sustained him. The sorcerer screamed, a raw, undiluted sound of loss and terror as his power drained away, as the immortality he had bargained for evaporated like morning mist. The sanctum shuddered. The warped architecture beginning to crumble now that the will sustaining it had been broken. Sigils flickered and died. The air lost its psychic charge. Vorax collapsed to his knees, his form finally stabilizing into that of an ancient, withered man. His true appearance hidden beneath centuries of sorcery. He looked up at Thor with eyes that had witnessed the Horus heresy, the birth of the Imperium, the long, slow decline into the dark millennium. "Kill me then," he rasped, all grandeur gone from his voice. "Send me to whatever awaits." Thor looked down at the broken sorcerer, then at the crumbling fortress around them, at the dead world beyond, at the great rift tearing the galaxy in two. He thought of the Emperor on his golden throne, of Commissar Thorn's unyielding faith, of Chapter Master Castellan's grim determination. He thought of what this universe had become. "Death would be a mercy you have not earned," Thor said quietly. "You will face justice, the kind your victims never received." He turned to Captain Hector, who stood watching with an expression Thor could not quite read. "The sorcerer is yours. Do with him what you will." Hector nodded slowly, his gaze moving from Thor to the broken form of Vorax and back again. "The Inquisitor will have questions," he said. "Many questions." Thor looked toward the sanctum's ceiling, toward the stars beyond, toward the great rift that dominated this sector of space. Somewhere out there, answers waited. A way home. A purpose. "Then let us hope," Thor replied, "that I have answers." The return to the Phalanx's oath was a somber affair. The victory felt hollow, the silence in the Thunderhawk transport heavier than the roar of battle had been. The Space Marines tended to their wounded and performed the rites of the fallen with quiet efficiency. But their eyes kept drifting to Thor, who stood apart at the viewport, watching the receding graveyard of the Vidian Reach. He had not merely defeated a sorcerer. He had challenged the fundamental nature of their reality and won. The sons of Dorn were warriors of absolute conviction, their faith in the Emperor and the Imperial truth an unshakable bedrock. Thor had just demonstrated that bedrock could be flexible. Captain Hector approached, his helmet removed, revealing a face etched with fresh lines of contemplation. "The Chapter Master wishes to speak with you. Privately." Thor nodded, pulling his gaze from the dying stars. "I expected as much." The audience chamber felt different this time. The honor guard was present, but they stood at a greater distance, their vigilance tempered by a new, wary respect. Chapter Master Castellan sat upon his marble throne, the captured sorcerer Vorax kneeling in bindings of null-field alloy before him. The traitor's power was utterly suppressed, his head bowed. Castellan's gaze was like granite. "You broke him, not just his body or his sorcery. You broke his connection to the warp. Our librarians confirm it. The taint is severed. This has never been done before. Not by the Grey Knights, not by the Emperor's own legion during the Great Crusade." Thor met his stare. It was necessary. Necessary? Castellan leaned forward, his bionic arm whirring softly. You rewrote reality through sheer will, then performed an act that defies 10,000 years of understanding. The Inquisition will call it heresy. They will call you a demon of a new and unknown kind. They will seek to dissect you, to understand what you are, and if they cannot, they will destroy you. I am not afraid of your Inquisition. You should be. The chapter master's voice dropped to a dangerous rumble. Fear keeps us alive. Fear of the alien, the mutant, the heretic, and you, Thor Odinson, are all three in their eyes. From his kneeling position, Vorax began to laugh, a dry, broken sound. He is right, Thunder God. You are too strange, too powerful, too different. The Imperium cannot tolerate you. They will hunt you. They will send armies. They will burn worlds you walk upon. It is their nature. Thor looked from the broken sorcerer to the rigid chapter master. He saw the truth in their words. He had offered his help, proven his worth, and saved their warriors. Yet, his very existence was a threat to the fragile, brutal order they fought to maintain. What would you have me do? Thor asked Castellan. The chapter master was silent for a long moment, his eyes boring into Thor as if weighing his very soul. The sons of Dorn owe you a debt. You saved my warriors and accomplished a mission that would have cost us dearly. We are bound by honor to repay it. He stood, a massive figure of yellow ceramite and grim resolve. I will give you a choice, and I will honor whichever you make. He gestured to Vorax. Option 1. You take the sorcerer to Inquisitor Vorn. You submit to her judgment. You become a tool of the Imperium, to be used until you break or they find a way to destroy you. Your fate is no longer your own. Thor's jaw tightened. And the second option? Castellan's gaze was unwavering. You leave. Now. I will report that the sorcerer was killed in the assault, his body consumed by warp fire. I will report that you fell in battle, a noble sacrifice for a cause not your own. You will be a ghost. Free to walk this dark millennium without the Inquisition's leash. He paused, his voice grave. But you walk it alone, an outlaw in a galaxy of monsters. The choice was laid bare. Servitude or exile. The cage of dogma or the infinite hostile wilderness of the 41st millennium. Before Thor could answer, the ship's Vox system crackled to life. Chapter Master. Priority astropathic signal encrypted Ordo Malleus cipher. Inquisitor Vorny is en route. ETA 1 hour. She demands the immediate surrender of the entity and the prisoner. The chamber fell silent. The decision had been made for him. There would be no deliberation, no careful consideration. The Imperium's machinery was in motion. Thor looked at Castellan, then at the bound sorcerer, and finally at Mjolnir in his hand. He thought of the Emperor, a god who had sacrificed his freedom for his people. He thought of Odin, a king who had borne the weight of terrible secrets for the good of his realm. He was neither. He was a warrior, a protector. But he could not protect anyone from the inside of an inquisitorial lab or burned at the stake as a heretic. He made his choice. Give me a ship, Thor said, his voice low and firm, a small one, something fast and untraceable. Castellan nodded slowly, a flicker of what might have been respect in his eyes. It will be done. He turned to his guards. Prepare a Starhawk interceptor from the secondary hangar, scrub its ident, load it with supplies. Thor turned to leave, but Castellan's voice stopped him. Where will you go? Thor looked toward the stars visible through the viewport, toward the great bleeding rift. The sorcerer said his god could not see me, that I was a variable. If that is true, then there may be others like me, others who fell through the cracks. Or perhaps. He glanced back, a grim determination settling on his features. Perhaps I will find why I was brought here. The Bifrost does not break by accident. As he walked toward the hangar, he passed Vorax. The broken sorcerer looked up, his eyes devoid of madness, filled only with a strange, weary clarity. They will find you eventually, Odinson. The Imperium is vast. Chaos is patient. You have made yourself a prize. Thor did not break his stride. Let them try. In the hangar, the Starhawk awaited him. A sleek, blade-like vessel, its imperial markings already being last burned away by servitors. As he ascended the ramp, a figure emerged from the shadows. Captain Hector stood holding a data slate. A gift, the Space Marine said, handing it over. Star charts, locations of forgotten worlds, neutral trade hubs, Xenos territories where the Imperium's eyes are blind. And a warning. Abaddon the Despoiler has taken an interest. Your display of power at the Rift was a beacon. His Black Legion hunts for you. Thor took the slate. Why help me? Because the Imperium is a fortress under siege, Hector replied. And sometimes, a lone warrior outside the walls can strike blows that those inside cannot. He made the sign of the Aquila across his chest. The Emperor protects. Thor entered the ship, the ramp sealing behind him. In the cockpit, he powered up the engines, the vessel humming to life. On the main screen, a warning flashed. Inquisitorial vessel Malleus Veritatis entering system. He input the coordinates from Hector's data slate, a remote, unnamed world on the far side of the Rift. He would start his search there. With a final burst of thrust, the Starhawk shot from the hangar bay and vanished into the immaterium, a ghost swallowed by the darkness between stars. The unnamed world was a jewel of sapphire and emerald adrift in the silent void, untouched by the Imperium's stamp or Chaos's corruption. Thor brought the Starhawk down through a pristine atmosphere, landing on a beach of white sand where turquoise waves lapped gently. The air was clean, scented with alien flora, the twin suns warm on his face. It was the first peace he had known since arriving in this universe. It lasted precisely 3 days. On the 4th morning, the sky darkened, not with clouds, but with the angular, brutalist shapes of Imperial vessels. A flotilla of frigates led by the unmistakable silhouette of the Malleus Veritatis. They descended without hails, without warning, their weapons batteries charging with a low, ominous hum. Thor stood from the campfire he had built, his hand finding Mjolnir's familiar grip. They had found him, faster than even he had feared. But the ships did not open fire. Instead, a single smaller craft detached, an unarmed shuttle. It landed 100 meters down the beach, its ramp descending to reveal a lone figure, Inquisitor Helena Vorn. She wore no armor, carried no visible weapon. Her hands were empty. This was not an assault. It was a parley. Thor walked to meet her, the sand crunching under his boots. The wind tugged at his cloak, carrying the salt of the sea and the ozone of Imperial engines. "Inquisitor," he said, stopping a dozen paces away. "You have come a long way to renew our conversation." Vorni's face was a mask of cool calculation, but Thor saw the tension around her eyes. She was afraid, though she hid it well. "The sons of Dorn reported you dead. A noble end. I received the astropathic missive myself." Her lips thinned. "But the warp tells different stories. My psychers have been screaming for a week. Visions of a golden storm, a hammer that cracks realities, a god walking alone. You are remarkably difficult to erase, Thor Odinson. Then you know I do not wish to fight you. I know you represent a crisis of faith the Imperium cannot withstand. She took a step forward, her gaze intense. I am not here to arrest you. I am here to make you an offer, one that does not involve a cage. Thor remained silent, letting her continue. This was a new tactic. The galaxy is dying, Vorn said, her voice low and urgent. The Cicatrix Maledictum has split it in two. Chaos gains ground every day. The Emperor's light flickers. We are losing, and we have been losing for 10,000 years. She gestured to the fleet in the sky. The Imperium is a blunt instrument, designed for survival at any cost. It cannot innovate. It cannot adapt. It can only repeat the same brutal strategies that have kept it alive this long. She looked at him, and for the first time, Thor saw not a fanatic, but a desperate pragmatist. But you are something new, a power outside our understanding. You broke a sorcerer's connection to the warp. You have done the impossible. The Imperium would see you as a threat to be eliminated. I see you as a resource, a potential weapon they are too blind to wield. So you would make me your personal weapon instead? Thor's voice was flat. No, I would make you my ally. The word hung in the air, shocking in its heresy. I have resources, ships, information, agents. You have power and a perspective we lack. Work with me, not for the Imperium, but for humanity. Hunt the threats we cannot see. Go where we cannot go. Be the scalpel where the Imperium can only be the hammer. It was a seductive offer. Freedom and purpose. The chance to fight the good fight without being shackled by dogma. And in return? Thor asked. In return, I keep the hounds of the Inquisition off your scent. I provide you with targets, intelligence, sanctuary. We save what can be saved from the shadows. She met his eyes. This is the only path that does not end with you dead or running forever. Thor looked past her, at the perfect untouched world, a sanctuary he could not keep. He looked at the fleet in the sky, the embodiment of a civilization that would never accept him. And he looked at the Inquisitor, offering a third path, a path of shadows and compromises, of fighting a war within a war. He thought of the stories he had been told of the Emperor, a being of immense power who had tried to lead humanity into a golden age of reason, only to be betrayed and broken. He would not make the same mistake. He was not a leader. He was a protector. I will not be your ally, Inquisitor Vorn, he said. And he saw the hope die in her eyes. I will not be your weapon. I will not wear your leash, however gilded. Her face hardened. Then you leave me no choice. But, he interrupted, his voice softening, I will be a shield for those who have none. I will fight the battles that need fighting. If your intelligence leads me to a world threatened by darkness, I will defend it. If your agents uncover a horror that must be stopped, I will face it. He hefted Mjolnir, and a single clean crack of thunder rolled across the beach. But I will do so on my terms, by my code. You may point me at monsters, Inquisitor, but you do not command me. Is that understood? Helena Vorn stared at him for a long, silent moment. The military part of her mind screamed at the insubordination, the heresy of it. The pragmatic survivor in her saw the only victory she was going to get. A free weapon was still a weapon. An unbound god was still a force for order. Slowly, she nodded. Understood. She reached into her robe and produced a small crystalline data chip. This is a secure, one-way astropathic communique device. It will receive messages. It cannot be traced. I will send you suggestions. Thor took the chip. It felt cold in his hand. Then our business is concluded. He turned his back on her and her fleet, a gesture of supreme confidence or madness. He walked toward his ship, toward the endless, star-dusted dark. Behind him, Vorn watched him go, a solitary, thunderous figure against the vastness of an uncaring galaxy. She keyed her vox bead. All vessels, stand down. Plot a course for the Scarus sector. We have reports of Genestealer cult activity. As her shuttle ascended, she took one last look at the beach below. Thor was gone, his ship already a speck against the suns. She had not tamed the god. She had not captured the anomaly. But she had, perhaps, pointed a storm at the enemies of mankind. And in the 41st millennium, that was sometimes the only victory one could hope for. Thor's journey through the grim darkness of the 41st millennium had reached its first pivotal crossroads. He had arrived as a castaway, a divine king stripped of his kingdom, a force of nature bewildered by an unnatural reality. He had been tested by the Imperium's unyielding dogma, tempted by chaos's seductive whispers, and measured by warriors whose entire existence was war. He had not broken. He had not bent. He had not joined. Instead, he had carved a third path, one as unprecedented in this universe as his own arrival. He was neither Imperial servant nor Chaos champion, nor even a simple rogue element. He was something new, a free agent of justice in a galaxy that had forgotten the meaning of the word. A living god walking among those who worshipped a corpse, his very existence a quiet, thunderous rebuttal to the Imperium's central tenet: that there is no hope, only war. His alliance with Inquisitor Vorn was not one of master and servant, but of mutual grudging necessity. She would provide direction, steering his boundless power toward threats too subtle for the Imperial hammer. He would be her scalpel in the dark, a solution she could never officially sanction. It was a fragile, heretical pact, built on pragmatism over faith, and it would inevitably draw the attention of powers far greater than a single Ordo Malleus Inquisitor. The Chaos gods had felt his power, a clean, foreign light in their domain of corruption. They would not forget him. Abaddon the Despoiler hunted for a weapon to break the Long War's stalemate. The alien races would soon register the anomaly in their own auguries. The storm was gathering. But for now, Thor Odinson, god of thunder, prince of a lost Asgard, was free. His ship, the Valkyrie's Lament, slipped through the void, its course set for the first of Vorna's suggestions, a mining world on the edge of the Segmentum Pacificus, where the populace prayed not to the Emperor, but for a miracle. He would bring them one. Not the miracle of faith they expected, but the miracle of action, the miracle of a hammer and lightning. He would defend them, not for an emperor, not for an Imperium, but because it was right. And in doing so, he would plant a seed of a different story in a galaxy of endless, grim tales. A story that whispered, "You are not alone. A storm is coming. And for the first time in 10,000 years, it fights for you." The road home was long, and perhaps it did not exist. But the road ahead was clear. He would walk it. He would fight. And the 41st millennium would learn to fear the thunder once more.